Hey there, it's Tiffany, and welcome back inside the labyrinth. On this episode, I am coming to you from Starglider Studios, where I record a lot of the music that I do. And I don't know though, when I was looking through the test shots, when I was doing the test shots, I was kind of thinking to myself, this kind of looks like it could be my underground lair. So there you go. And I am just really loving the fall weather right now, although it's supposed to go back up to get warmer or something next week. And normally I do enjoy warm weather, but I'm sorry, by the time October rolls around, I'm just like, okay, summer has pretty much worn out its welcome, and I want to bust out the fall clothes, both modern and 18th century and other eras. I do enjoy dressing for fall and winter more than I enjoy dressing for summer and spring, but I don't know, that's just me. So before I begin though, I do want to give a couple shout outs. The first one is to my friend Sally Knuckles. She helped with giving information and tips and pointers for not only this podcast, this particular episode, but also for the presentation that Laura Lockard and I did on women's history, women in the 18th century and throughout history. And she was really, really great and helpful with giving tips and suggestions and just different sources to look into. And so thank you very much. And Sally's also in the Pittsburgh Historical Costume Society with Laura and I. And Laura's also one of my bandmates and Wayward companions too. So yeah, shout out to both of you because you're both lovely ladies. And also another shout out as well to Jess of Penny River Costumes. I'm wearing, in this episode, wearing her time traveler shirt. I recently purchased it off of her site. I don't know how well you could see that. This is a long sleeve shirt that I got for the cold weather that we're supposed to be getting in October. But I will be buying a short sleeve shirt for warmer weather as well. And Jess, her store is awesome. She's a must follow, and I will leave a link to her Etsy shop in the description. So definitely check her out. Okay, so on to building your persona. So if you're considering getting into the world of living history and reenacting, first of all, welcome to the family. And we'd love to have you. The more the merrier. So if you're thinking about it, definitely, come join us, give it a try. And I think you'll be having a lot of fun with it. Now, one thing though that I will say, the very first thing that I will say is when you're thinking about getting into something like living history and reenacting, think about why you want to do it. Now, people want to join this realm for a myriad of reasons. Sometimes maybe they see a historical drama, a period drama, and they absolutely love the aesthetics. They love the costumes, the clothing, the accessories, and that's what attracts them. And this is actually a huge thing. I find a lot of people do start becoming interested just in history in general, and then eventually maybe segueing into actual living history and reenacting when they see something like a period drama, and they see the beautiful clothing or the beautiful accessories, and they want in on that. Now, another reason people might want to get into the living history and reenacting realm is perhaps they recently learned about a certain person and they are fascinated by that particular person and their life. They want to research more, and therefore that research ends up leading them to wanting to do more than just read books and documents on the subject. And others, and I find that this is true for most of us, we do have a true passion for history. We have a passion for learning about the people and the events and just everything that came before us, and learning about their ways, learning about how they might have done certain things, even just something that we might take for granted today, like cooking dinner over a stove. How did they do that? Did they, how do you cook a meal over a campfire or over a hearth? So that sort of a fascination also draws people. So whatever your reason might be, and like I said, people come into this for a lot of different reasons. Once you determine exactly why you want to do it, because a lot of people overlook that, knowing exactly why you want to do it is really important. For instance, me, for example, as I said in, I believe, the very first episode, was that I've had a passion for history and learning about other times and places outside of my own for as long as I can remember. And what led me to the world of living history and reenacting was when I was writing my book series, The Birthright. And The Birthright does take place against many different historical backdrops. So I wanted a more hands-on approach to research, and that's how I got started. However, I developed such a passion for doing it, for just doing the whole living history reenacting thing. It's become a huge part of who I am. It's been integrated into the music I do. It's been integrated into even more into my writing. And I've found different ways to just really just include it in really a lot of my, almost all of my projects. Once you've determined the why you want to do it, then you want to maybe really think about when. And when I say when, I mean, what era do you want to do? Which one calls to you the most? For me, it was 18th century, like mid to late 18th century. That was, at the end of the day, was where I wanted to be. Now, I love all different parts of history. I love like the medieval era. I love parts of the Edwardian, late Victorian eras. And there's things about all eras that I absolutely love. But what really called to me, what really spoke to me, was mid to late 18th century. Now, for you, it might be different. It might be, you might absolutely feel right at home in the Edwardian era. You might say, no, I want to do more Civil War era. Or, you might want to go all the way back to medieval or Renaissance. It's really up to you, but you need to really determine that before you involve yourself in any type of group or site, ideally at least. Now, many of us who are real history buffs, we might have more than one era that we enjoy studying, or more than one era that calls to us. But it is important to just pick one to start with. Now, I've been doing this for a little over 4 years at this point now, and I started out doing American Rev War, then I went to French and Indian, Whiskey Rebellion, Regency era. And by Regency, for those unfamiliar with what that is, Regency is basically, think Jane Austen. I've also dabbled a little bit in late Victorian, Edwardian eras too, a little bit of World War I. So while mid to late 18th century is my main era of focus, I've done a little bit of other eras as well, but I don't recommend really doing that until you have maybe at least a year's experience, maybe even more than that, because there is a lot of research and a lot that is, I'm not going to lie to you, if you're serious about doing it, there really is a lot of research and a lot that is involved with doing living history and reenacting. Okay, so when it comes to research, I totally get how somebody who's brand new to this might find the idea of researching and putting together a persona, or even just researching a given era in general, very overwhelming, because I understand there's a lot of different information out there. But one good way to start that is just by looking at the different individuals that lived in that particular era. Or if it's easier, just focus on one specific person and just look at how they might have lived. What was their station in life? Were they upper class and middling or lower class? And maybe see which station might speak to you the most at this moment. And just focus there. You can always branch out later when you're a little bit more experienced. And also remember that people tend to remember and learn history best through stories. So what are some maybe cool stories about that specific person? Or what are some really interesting and exciting stories about that person's era? And also just look at what stories are available from local historic sites about the men and women who lived there, maybe in your particular area. Also, you can look at artifacts and, build stories from there, but always document things as well, because you always want to have something to refer to if, say, a visitor might question something and, ask you, oh, where did you hear that from? Or, can I ask what source? Because, like I said in my first episode, there are, depending on which point of view you're coming from, it might, what somebody else knows versus what you're researching might differ a little. Like I said, if you're doing French and Indian War, it would depend on whether you're coming from the English's perspective, the French perspective, or a Native American's perspective. It really depends. So you always want to document things. You always want to have something to back yourself up. You don't want to reinvent history either. Now, obviously, we do want to challenge our visitors. We want to make them think, of course. And a lot of what's put out there by the media and so on, it's not always very accurate. And a lot of the times, mainstream sources, especially if you're getting on social media and looking at the different memes that are on Facebook, there's a lot of inaccuracies out there. But at the same time, you don't want to get so wild and crazy that you're just completely, just reinventing the wheel. You want to make sure, like I said, you're documenting everything. And, while you do, trust me, I understand. I see stuff in the, that's put out there all the time. And I get just, that's not right, and it's just, it really lights a fire in me that and I'm just sitting there like, just thinking about how wrong that video, say, on that's making its rounds on Facebook and people are passing it off as absolute fact. Trust me, I get to a point where I completely want to combat that too. However, you want to be careful of how you do it. You don't want to do it just to be contrary to a Facebook meme or a video or some article that you found to be absolute nonsense. When you do that, you want to be able to document and back yourself up. And that's the thing, we're there to make history come alive for people. We're there to give people a different perspective, another perspective that they might not have seen. But we're also not there to reinvent history either, and that's also important to remember. And try to use primary sources such as diaries, journals, written documents, etc. And there are a lot of great secondary and third sources as well, but you want to try to use as many primary sources as possible. And the nice thing about publishing today is that there are a lot of journals, diaries, and official documents that have actually been formally published. So they're very easy. They might be very easy to find in your library or on Amazon or a bookstore or wherever you shop for your reading materials. Now, I have run into several in the living history and reenacting realm that will not even go near the internet for research. I understand where they're coming from, but I don't totally agree with that. I do think that there are a lot of very good blogs and websites out there that do have a lot of really good information and can point you in a very good direction. However, it is important to be discerning of where exactly that information on the internet is coming from. Okay, so once you have an idea of the kind of persona that you want to do, you want to start asking yourself some basic questions. And I will leave these questions as well in the description. But these questions are, number one, who am I? That one's pretty obvious. Number two, where was I born? What year was I born in? And how old am I? And number three, how did I get here? How did I get in this place? And this is important if you're at a specific living history site, because a lot of living history sites, they're made up villages. So you want to maybe work on your persona's background to in order to tell visitors exactly why you're there. And how do you spend most of your time? What did you have for breakfast? What did you have for dinner last night? Did you have the same thing for breakfast this morning that you had for dinner? And why? How did you learn your skills? What problems, challenges are you facing now? And what have you accomplished? What are your goals? What is your social status? Again, are you of the aristocracy? Are you a middling? Are you lower class? Just questions like that. And I mentioned before, Deborah Franklin was the common law wife of Ben Franklin, and she took care of all of his businesses while he was in Europe for the many years that he was. And also Abigail Adams, who was left alone for years to take care of the family farm while John was in Philadelphia writing the Declaration of Independence. And her biographies do go into great detail about the difficulties of farm life and also their midwifery. That was also a very important job. Now, since I am in the music world, one particular woman that I am researching that I do want to portray at different events is a woman by the name of Charlotte Brent. She's an English 18th century opera singer, and she was a child prodigy, and she basically, her parents were musical as well, and she was brought up in that world, and she went on to be a very well-known opera singer in the 18th century. And as I said, she's somebody that I'm currently researching and do intend to portray at some events. And there are also a lot of interesting occupations that women had in the 18th century, which I will cover in the forthcoming podcast. I believe it'll be episode 17 or 18 once our Halloween episodes are done. But it is the presentation that I gave with Laura at the Neville House on women in the 18th century and throughout history. That's going to be its own podcast episode. So I will get more. I do get a lot more into this. Laura and I do. We get a lot more into this in that particular episode. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of a rundown here of the different occupations that women had in the 18th century, because a lot of people think that women did absolutely nothing in the 18th century, and that's absolutely not true. So basically, some of the stuff they did includes postmaster, actress, singer, tinsmith, blacksmith, silversmith, printer, even a journalist. You can also look up women like Anna Ella Carroll. Now, she's more 19th century. She served as an advisor to Abraham Lincoln's administration. Also, Sarah Kemble Knight. She's an interesting person. I have a copy of her diary, and it's, once again, it really gives you a good idea of travel, of how travel was back in the 18th century. And Sarah Kemble Knight, she was a teacher. She ran a boarding house. She also had some paralegal experience, and she basically was traveling. Her entire diary is about her travels to a friend's estates, a friend of hers whose husband passed away, and she was going to help settle the estate. So she's a very interesting person to look up. Also Clementina Rind, who was a printer, and she ran a printing press after her husband passed away. She had to support her children, and she supported herself and her children by running a printing press. And Maude Wagner, who is one of my favorites. Now, she's more Edwardian. but she is the first known female tattoo artist. So if you look up anybody, look her up, because I love her. She's absolutely so fascinating. She met her when she met her husband. He was a tattoo artist, and she wanted to learn the art of tattoo. So her husband, who was her suitor at the time, well, he was pursuing her. He wanted a date. So she made made a little arrangement to where she'll give him a romantic date if he'll teach her how to give tattoos. Well, he agreed to that, and he was showing her how to tattoo until she eventually became an expert at it. And they toured together. They toured from town to town together, just demonstrating their tattooing abilities. So one more interesting thing about Maude Wagner is that she and her husband, they taught their young daughter how to tattoo, and their daughter was giving tattoos at age 9, which I don't know. I think that piece of information is really cool. But anyway, the possibilities are endless, including for women, because a lot of people are under the misconception that there aren't a whole lot of options for women in the living history and reenactment realm, and that is absolutely not true. There are many different avenues you can go down. However, like I said earlier, don't try to attempt doing multiple things at once. Just focus on one area, and you should be good to go as far as that is concerned. Okay, so when you contact a site and state your interest and let them know that you've already started doing your homework, if you have. And if you haven't, let them know that you are willing to do your own research, because of course, everybody's always willing to help you, but initiative is always appreciated. And trust me, they will definitely appreciate the fact that you are willing to do things on your own, and you're not expecting everybody there to just kind of hold your hand through everything, because you are going to have to do a lot of your own research. Like I said, it is, it's work. I'm not going to lie to you. And you do have to really love researching history. So, just being honest. And a lot of reenactment groups and even some living history sites will also put you through a sort of probationary period. Now, this can last maybe a month or up to a year, but typically not longer than a year. Most of the living history sites and groups that I've been a part of, or that I know of at least, they usually won't extend their probationary period for longer than a year. Now, don't let that intimidate you. Basically, the probationary period, it's just simply to allow you to get a feel for where you're going to fit in. And to allow, maybe others to see where you can fit in as well, maybe give you some suggestions. And, like I said, a lot of careful research should go into what you're going to do anyway. A lot of really, just extensive research. I mean, you're always constantly researching when you're doing these things. And, you don't want to have a death by petticoat faux pas. And for those that don't know what that means, I very often refer to Mary Miley Theobald's book, Death by Petticoat, American History Myths Debunked. It is a really good book. Like I always say, I'm not saying it's a be-all, end-all, but it's a great place to get started as far as just seeing what to say and what not to say. Because sometimes, actually a lot of the time, what not to say is just as important as what to say. Now, once you have an idea of the type of persona that you are going to portray, then, or at least maybe, at least a rough idea, then you want to start on the clothing. Now, I'm not going to get into clothing in this episode. I'm going to save that for another episode because that's actually a very, very involved topic. However, one thing that I will say for right now and that I always advise is to always start simple, because it is a lot easier to add than it is to take away. So, I'll give you a short example. Say, for instance, you think that you want to be a high-ranking military officer. So you purchase all the clothing, before you even start doing the research. You just know you want to wear the nice clothes. So you just purchase the clothing, and then as you're getting into it, you start thinking to yourself, well, hey, I really like blacksmithing. Well, now you have all these clothes and that you really didn't need to buy. So I always say, start simple. You can always add later. So, and I'll just leave it at that, because like I said, I'm going to have a whole another episode on clothing. I can't wait for that one, because I think that's going to be fun. I love clothing, cosmetics, accessories. That's my thing. I love it. So that's going to be saved for its own episode. But I hope that this gave you at least a little bit of pointers on where to start, maybe at least a little bit of an idea if you're thinking of doing living history or reenacting. Hopefully this was helpful for you, and I look forward now to bringing you Halloween. It's going to be all about Halloween throughout October. I am really, really excited. And one of the last times that I was at the Neville House giving history tours, I was given this as a little present. One of the other staff members, it's Ghosts. It's Ghosts, Washington Revisited. So, yes, it's ghost lore of the nation's capital. So I will be, referencing some of this. One of the staff members, as I was starting to say, the staff members gave me this as a present. It was just kind of sitting on her shelf. And she told me, she's like, this looked like something that you would like. And I'm like, yeah, I could always use one more of these, definitely. And another episode that's going to be covered in October is, now I mentioned this on my social media, so those of you that follow me on social media might kind of know what's coming, but I am going to be talking about my favorite famous haunted doll. I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet, but this is from actually my own small collection of antique dolls. And I'm going to, just kind of show you a little bit of them, and also talk about my favorite famous haunted doll. I think that counts as haunted history, but yes, this is coming up. And so is this, and I look forward to having all sorts of Halloween fun with you guys. I think it's going to be fun. I might dress up in a costume here and there, not an 18th century costume, just an actual Halloween costume. I don't know, we'll see, but we're going to have fun, and I look forward to having you all along. And then in November, we're going to get back to business as usual with talking about history and mythology and just different things within the living history and reenacting realm. So we're going to have lots and lots of fun, but hope you all enjoy the last of September. I'm going to be at Penn's Colony tomorrow. Actually, it's this weekend, this Saturday, tomorrow. And I'm going to be just doing interviews. Just keep in mind that most of the interviews that I conduct from between now and the end of Halloween are not going to go up until November, just because, like I said, October is going to be all about Halloween. All right, so thank you very much. I hope you found this informative, and I will see you in the next episode. See you in October.